France is calling for an immediate end to the bombardment of the last rebel-held province in Syria. A suspected Russian airstrike in Idleb province on Friday killed at least 14 people. Russian warplanes are supporting the offensive by the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's forces. That 4-month campaign has killed an estimated 935 Syrians, many of them women and children. More than 100,000 people have been forced from their homes. Let's talk now to Panos Moumtzis. He's the United Nations Assistant Secretary General and the Regional Humanitarian Coordinator for Syria. He joins us on Skype from London. Panos Moumtzis, your people on the ground in this area, just talk us through what they're experiencing, what they're seeing.
What is really happening, and the stories we're hearing from the humanitarian workers on the ground, is a situation which is totally unacceptable. On a daily basis, for the last 100 days, there's been airstrikes, ground offensive, on hospitals, on schools, on markets, on residential areas, creating an absolute total panic and havoc among civilian population. We're very concerned. We've had more than 100 incidents on schools and health clinics alone. And that has resulted in massive displacement. In fact, there's been more than 500,000 displacements that have taken place. Many areas are disrupted. Humanitarian assistance cannot reach people from where they're needed, but also entire towns and parts of and villages have been deserted because people are scared and are running away for safety to escape this military offensive that has been continuing non-stop. I hope there will be enough international community's mobilization, and most importantly, we really want to see a cessation of hostilities taking place on the ground. The basic rule of war to respect civilians has to be respected on the ground.
OK, just to be clear, what we're talking about here today on this programme specifically is the death of at least 14 people as a result of a Russian bombing raid. But you're now saying as well that there is also, that is dovetailing, if you will, with a ground campaign which is specifically targeting the likes of schools and hospitals.
Absolutely. I think this latest incident on Friday is actually part of a numbers of incidents that have taken place now, in particular since the end of April, where we saw an escalation of the conflict, an escalation where we saw, of course, civilians on both sides of the conflict being affected. And that's very difficult. As humanitarian workers, we have put a massive response on the ground. So access, protection of civilians, protection of staff. We've just had, including paramedics, ambulance, nurses, and humanitarian skilled. And of course, funding, which remains an issue for us. We need urgently the resources to be able to respond to this massive catastrophe that is unfolding day in, day out, without much attention by the international community at the moment.
This self-contained campaign, this micro picture, if you will, of the broader conflict, that really kicked off on April the 29th, April the 30th, end of April, let's agree on that. Are we saying that that will generate another wave of a humanitarian catastrophe? You've just used that word. I don't wish you to use it again if it's not accurate, but is that kind of what we're discussing?
I'm afraid it's already happening. You know, we have had now a wave of at least 500,000 displacements. Several people got displaced multiple times within Idlib. Idlib, the province of Idlib, is the most populated governorate in Syria. More than 3 million people live there. In fact, more than half of them are people who are displaced, Syrians who came from other parts of the country to Idlib. So the risk is extremely high, and the movements we have seen is primarily people heading further north towards the direction of the Turkish border. So the implication is not just for Idlib, but it's, of course, it's for Turkey, it's for a lot of Europe. It's the dynamics on the ground are really very, very worrying, and we don't want to see a further escalation. A humanitarian crisis is already unfolding as we speak.
OK, you're using the word escalation there. 10 days ago on this channel, we were talking about the so-called peace process in Astana, not the UN process in Geneva. That's kind of dead and buried and gone away. We're talking about Astana. They were talking about Idlib. They were talking about de-escalation zones. The reality is escalation, not de-escalation. How does that work?
In fact, indeed, the agreement that was reached in Astana on the meeting by the three guarantors on the 1st and 2nd of August, unfortunately, it lasted just 3 days. So the ink hadn't really fully dried on the paper of the agreement that was reached when we saw yet another escalation that has taken place. And it has continued now ever since August the 5th, when it started all over again. So it's really vital for governments, heads of states, the Astana guarantors, countries of influence to be able to do the right thing, to be able to bring all sides of the conflict together to a way forward that will ensure the safety and the protection of civilians. What is going on at the moment is really a failure of the political will, the international political will, to implement really a ceasefire or a peaceful solution on the ground that would take into account the fact that there is millions of children, women, and families caught up in between. And that is really what is happening right now, including the attack that we saw on Friday.
OK, we'll leave it there for the moment. Panos Moumtzis there in London. Thank you very much, sir.